My name is Molly Mulhern. I'm a climate ambassador and a concerned Camden resident. I fell in love with the state of Maine at age 7. I was standing in a tide pool at Acadia and the rangers picked up a sea star and a sea cucumber dripping with water and they let us touch them. Last fall, at age 62, I went back to Acadia. I was a volunteer ranger at the Schoodic SEA education program. We took middle schoolers into tide pools. We showed them the rockweed and the green crabs. We didn't show them sea stars, nor did we show them sea cucumbers. They're gone. We've lost the sea cucumbers and the sea stars from the, I just have to figure this out. Hang on. We've lost the sea cucumbers from the tide pools. Why? Because the warming seas with more carbon dioxide are more acidic. The richness of tide pool life is gone. A part of me is gone. I suspect you have suffered a similar kind of loss. I love hiking, the wilderness, sailing, skiing, our community of Camden. With climate change, we stand to lose much of what we love. I'm here tonight to start a conversation about Camden climate action. There's a lot going on right now, and a lot of it's scary and uncertain. Yet there's a connecting thread. You and I, we are the drivers of the climate crisis. We're also the solution. It's time we took in our power and used it. Hopefully this evening will inspire you to action. You don't need me to tell you that climate affects us every day. In the past, we've had a more consistent climate, snowy winters, clear summers, brisk falls, a reliable growing season. Things have changed. And yes, change is the only constant. Yet today, changes are happening linearly, non-linearly. You see these changes in the tide pools, in your driveway when an afternoon shower turns it to a raging river, from the deck of your sailboat when you sail Penobscot Bay and you can't see the mountains because of the haze of a forest fire thousands of miles away. And you also feel these changes in your heart, loss, grief, and anxiety. We have just experienced the warmest summer ever recorded in Maine's history. Paradox is that this summer might also be the coolest from all the summers that follow. Human-caused emissions are warming the planet. Sea level rise will cause regular flooding along Maine's coastline and may lead to saltwater groundwater intrusion. 21,000 Maine jobs are at loss, coastal jobs are at threat of being lost. The Gulf of Maine is warming faster than 99% of the world's oceans. The recent temperature changes there are also changing the food chain in the Gulf of Maine. And because warmer air carries more water vapor, rainstorms have more water carry more water, causing more frequent washouts and other flooding, basements, hillsides. And 30 to 58% of species will go extinct given current climate change science. That loss I felt in the tide pool is a biodiversity loss, and it's part of the great mass extinction going on now. As one of my favorite climate authors wrote recently, when you have two concurrent existential crises, you don't get to pick only one to focus on. You must address both. Biodiversity loss, global warming, no matter how challenging. This is the equivalent of having both a dead battery and a flat tire in your car. You're still stuck if you only fix one. While we can't entirely prevent climate change, we can avoid the worst case scenarios. Scientists have determined that warming should be limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius to prevent the worst impacts of climate change. Past this threshold, changes get much worse. Every bit of warming we can avert matters. It's up to each and every one of us. This December 2022 storm led to a $200,000 to $300,000 rebuilding of our public landing. The new landing is still too low to avoid further damage from sea level rise. We were not prepared. We're not prepared now, even though we've rebuilt this boardwalk. And I find it a bit ironic that when they repainted the harbor master's office, this is the old office, they painted over the sea level rise scale. If only fighting climate change was as easy as repainting a building. How many times do you want your tax dollars to go toward rebuilding the public landing? Our changing climate puts what we love at risk. We can see and feel that risk. Life is uncertain. We don't know if the next rainfall is going to be 1 inch or 10 inches. The idea with risk assessment is to know your risk and to have a plan in place before disaster strikes. Does Camden have a climate action plan? Not at the moment. That is the work we'd like Camden citizens to address in the next year. This is the Maguntacook River in the May 2023 storm. That was only 5 or 6 inches of rainfall. What will a 10-inch storm look like in Camden? We have a small window of time to prevent global warming from surpassing 1.5 degrees Celsius. To prevent further global warming, we must reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by 43% by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. Yet, despite this urgent need, global leaders have failed to make meaningful climate action. This makes local climate action more important than ever. We can make a difference. We don't stop the warming by building things. We stop the warming by changing our ways. We have to stop burning fossil fuels. It's that simple. We need to get our power in other ways. We have 2, maybe 3 years to make an impact. The good news is the solutions are readily available, and the future is not yet here. Camden residents, you and I, should be part of the climate conversation. We care about Camden. We each make choices. The steps we take matter. We can reduce our emissions. We each have a voice and a vote, and we're stronger together. CamdenCAN, which stands for Climate Action Now, was created in the spring and summer of 2023 to help Camden forge a path through the climate crisis. CamdenCAN is a citizen-led organization committed to reducing Camden's contribution to climate change through local action, education, advocacy, and resources. We can think about climate action in a couple of different ways. We can think about our town's carbon footprint and take action to reduce it. We can share our successes with others to inspire them to take action as well. We can also think about how we can use the leverage of our community to help push for larger structural changes. It starts with each of us. What are Camden's biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions? The biggest source is transportation, our individual cars, our town vehicles, our business vehicles, our school buses. It's 49% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Second to that, because of our cold winters, our housing stock. That's our municipal buildings, our businesses, our churches, our own homes. That's 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Other large sources of greenhouse gas emissions are food sources and our food system. And in Camden, recreation. Consider for a minute the fossil fuel emissions generated in our harbor. What support do we provide for mega yachts? This powerboat had 2 jet skis, a Zodiac, another small tender, and its main engine, all powered by fossil fuels. And just as a little insight, 1 gallon of diesel fuel puts about 21 pounds of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Is it okay that we permit these in our harbor? Or consider the large cruise ships that anchor off Curtis Island or Rockland. Is it okay that we allow those into our harbor and their passengers via the buses that often burn diesel and sit idling? If, on the one hand, we keep allowing these fossil fuel guzzlers into our harbors, and on the other hand, we keep paying thousands of dollars a year to rebuild our infrastructure, our boardwalk, our road washouts, which are damaged because of climate change, which is caused by burning fossil fuels. Isn't that a little bit silly? Let's find a way as a community to talk about our choices. If we were so bold as to ban fossil fuel burning mega yachts and cruise ships, we'd be in good company. Amsterdam banned cruise ships in July 2023. And our beloved Snow Bowl. I am an avid skier. When the Snow Bowl is open, I am there early and often. And yet, our municipally owned ski area is the largest single user of energy in Camden. Right now, that energy equals greenhouse gas emissions. What do we as Camden residents want to do about that? How do we reduce these emissions and change them to green energy? What are our options? It's time for us to talk about these things in Camden. We can't get out of this crisis using the same systems and tools that got us into it. It's time to upset the status quo. We have to start doing things differently. We have to think differently. Yes, it's emissions, yet it's also the urge for more. We live on a planet whose resources are limited. One of my heroes is Ellen MacArthur, a fellow sailor who broke all the records, including being the fastest woman to solo circumnavigate. The trip literally blew her mind. When she came back, she shared her deepest revelation. The planet is like a sailing ship. Our resources are finite. When you cast off to circumnavigate, you have everything you need aboard. Our planet is our ship. We have to be resourceful. What we use, we need to reuse. When she returned, Ellen started a movement for a circular economy, and she gave a great TED Talk to tell about what she learned. There is no planet B. As on a sailing ship, we have to be smart with our choices. Let's do a thought experiment. Think back to the day you were born. What would your life have been like if you had to keep every single piece of trash you generated from the day you were born? What would that pile look like right now? Most of your trash is still here. It's just in someone else's backyard. And while we're having a thought experiment, think of the greenhouse gas emissions of every car, bus, plane, and powerboat ride you have ever taken. That's another kind of fouling our nest. Our atmosphere, where those greenhouse gases are trapped, is only 7 miles tall. That's about the distance from here to Rockland. We can't keep fouling our ship. We need to reimagine our relationship to all the resources on our planet. It's past time to upset the status quo, but we may be able to play catch up. How can we tackle our biggest sources of emissions and reimagine our world? We can gather our thoughts and ideas about the future of the harbor and the Snow Bowl in public workshops and conversations. We can demand that our town staff and the select board prioritize reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. We can learn about the financial incentives offered by Efficiency Maine and the IRA, so we can insulate our houses, convert to clean heating, and switch to clean dryers and electric hot water heaters. And we can talk about reducing our needs for everything from energy to one more trip to wherever. We can encourage EVs. Better yet, we can rethink owning a car. Do we each really need to own one? Every EV has a lot of emissions built into it. Those are called embodied emissions. Maybe the solution for the car, the one with the dead battery and the flat tire, is not to fix it at all, but to deconstruct its parts and reuse them. Can we get on without a car? Or better yet, share one? A few years ago, Watershed School students presented research that led to early Camden climate action. spearheaded by volunteers on the Energy Committee, many of whom are in this room here. In February 2018, the Town Select Board voted to sign on to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, the first town in Maine to do so. At the moment, there are 12 towns in Maine who are signed on to the Global Covenant of Mayors. With that pledge, we were meant to, in the first year, take a greenhouse gas inventory. In the second year, we were to assess our vulnerability and set reduction targets. And in the third year, we are to come up with a climate action plan. While we haven't met those goals, Camden has switched to LED streetlights, installed a town-owned bank of solar panels, installed heat pumps and geothermal in some of our buildings. SAD 28 has an electric school bus. At the high school, there are windmills, and there's a great course called the Hatchery, which is teaching students to reuse building materials. And on a private level, your neighbors are installing heat pumps and buying EVs. Local hotels are providing EV charging stations. And we have a great food waste company. Lawn rewilding is beginning to catch on. And we can't forget about the folks who are investigating the stormwater runoff and flooding along the Maguntacook watershed, working towards solutions for that and finding ways to restore fish habitats. Those are all great starts. And you'll hear more about what Camden has done for greenhouse gas emissions in a climate talk that will be here in this room on December 7th, where we'll have town staff, town volunteers, and private individuals talk about their changes to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Camden. Whatever action you might want to take, you won't be acting alone. And especially for businesses, there have never been more resources to support climate action. I live in a large Victorian house. For 30 years, I have avoided doing the insulation work required to drop my heating needs. This year, I finally looked into the incentives. I'll receive a 60% rebate off the cost of the work, and I can secure a loan to help. In addition, I'll get a 30% tax credit. That work was finished last week. It's a great feeling to take big, bold action to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. The incentives in the IRA, the Efficiency Maine are worth looking into. You can ask us, there's some materials up here about them. And finally, in the state of Maine, we have a climate council that's been working hard on paving the way for communities to take climate action. Our state's climate plan called Maine Won't Wait has fostered conversations and climate action in over 140 Maine communities. Many of them are neighbors. For example, in Dover-Foxcroft, the Climate Resiliency Committee decided to focus on the safety and comfort of their neighbors as their top priority. So they built a warming center for their first project. In Blue Hill, the communities gathered together and decided that the wastewater treatment, which is right on the shoreline, was their top priority. And they've got millions of dollars of work now going into keeping that safe. In York, climate volunteers are going door to door to help one another take advantage of the rebates and the tax credits in the Efficiency Maine program. In Rockport, a committee has secured $10,000 for outreach. In Belfast, the library and some other volunteers have spent 3 years talking about climate, presenting an incredible trove of lectures and panels, which you can find at their website, which culminated in the publication of the Belfast Climate Action Plan. There's a lot going on in neighborhood communities for climate action. What steps can we take? We can talk about it. You can share this presentation or give one of your own. You can support one another through climate conversations. We'll have some circles, as Julia mentioned, on October 5th. And 2 weeks later, there are small circles to talk about climate, what it feels like to be living in this day and age. You can reframe your life. We maybe can think about abundance and wealth as what we find in our tide pools and not what's in our bank accounts. You can share what you have. Maybe you've put in an EV plug-in and you can let your neighbors use it. Maybe you can host a neighborhood potluck and talk about your heat pump installation, or hold a potluck and ask your neighbor about their solar panels. In Paris, they're having neighborhood conversations. One of the great pieces of research to come out of all of this is that sharing and neighborhood gatherings build social resilience. We're going to need one another when the big storm comes. Maybe it's this weekend. We don't know. And after you've reduced your energy needs, you can find a way to make that energy green. Learn about electrifying everything. Get familiar with the role of utilities in your life. What is the grid? How does it work? Learn the laws and find out about our chance to lead the nation with a consumer-owned utility, Pine Tree Power. And businesses, we could start a business, a challenge to our businesses. Do you know what their greenhouse gas emissions are? Do they have solar panels? Are they B corporations? Do they have EV plugins for their customers? Find out for where you're spending money. It makes a difference. Bill McKibben, when asked what an individual can do to stop climate change, replied, "Stop acting like an individual." What steps do you want to take? Can you imagine a really cool Camden? And yes, the pun is intended. A noise-free, fume-free downtown quiet Camden as EVs glide past. And in the harbor, large yachts come to town, powered by solar and non-fossil fuels. They're also quiet and odor-free. There's food grown in a corner of your yard that you share with your neighbors, a lot. There's a sharing bank, maybe the library, for lawn equipment and EVs. Your solar panels are paying off. You have a net positive electric bill. You and your grandchild find a sea star in a local tide pool. And one day a month, we have a car-free downtown Camden. What do you see in a fossil fuel-free Camden? We can play a role in reducing emissions and enriching our lives, businesses, and communities by taking these high-impact climate steps. But we also know that to limit warming to a level that would protect a lot of what we hold dear, action needs to take place on a much larger scale. We can work from our position to expand influence outward, first to organizations related to us, then up to the town, state, and federal levels. Think through the steps you might want to take to influence change on a broader scale. Think about what power do you have? Who listens to you? What leverage and who shares your values? I stand before you using my voice. We don't have the luxury of silence or inaction. As we've learned, the way we live, the choices we make have a global impact. Our burning of fossil fuels has warmed the planet. We know that. What will we do with that knowledge? Status quo isn't acceptable if we want to stop the warming. We have to stop burning fossil fuels. I've stepped out of my comfort zone to be before you tonight. The climate crisis demands that we act. It won't be comfortable or convenient. Step out of your comfort zone on behalf of the planet and a better future. I heard an analysis recently that likened the cultural period we are in to the Enlightenment. Some decade, we'll look back and wonder what took us so long. The world will be cleaner, more sustainable, and more joyous. It won't be easy to make this shift, but we are on the way. This is a time of profound transformation. Talk about that to family and friends. Ask them, what role do you want to play? And speaking about using our voices, climate work needs artists and poets. I'd like to share this poem with you. It's entitled, "On Another Panel About Climate, They Ask Me to Sell the Future, and All I've Got is a Love Poem." It's written by Aisha Sadiqua. What if the future is soft and revolution is so kind that there is no end to us in sight? Whole cities breathe and bad luck is bested by a promise to the leaves. To withstand your own end is difficult. The future frolics about, promised to no one, as is her right. Rage against injustice makes the voice grow harsher yet. If the future leaves without us, the silence that will follow will be an unspeakable nothing. What if we convince her to stay? How rare and beautiful it is that we exist. What if we stun existence one more time? When I wake up, get out of bed, my 7-year-old cousin with her ruptured belly tags along. Then follows my grandmother, aunts, and my other cousins, and the violent shape of their drinking water. The earth remembers everything. Our bodies are the color of the earth, and we are nobodies. Been born from so many apocalypses, what's one more? Love is still the only revenge. It grows each time the earth is set on fire. But for what it's worth, I'd do this again. Commit to life unto life as the trees falls and take us with them. I'd follow love into extinction. Our Earthship is struggling. We need all hands on deck. What is your part today? And what do you want it to be tomorrow? We have 2 to 3 years to stop the emissions to keep us under the temperature threshold that is irreversible. My story of the loss of the sea star and the sea cucumber doesn't end there. Loss and grief are the fuel in our fight to save what we love. Remember, we can do this. We will do this. There are many places to continue this journey. I have listed some here. Remember, the greatest thing an individual can do to stop climate change is to stop acting like an individual. I stand here as a member of CamdenCAN. We've listed the mission statement here. There's a few other of our steering committee in the audience, so you could raise your hand if you'd like, but we've got several people who are helping us get this underway. There's sign-up sheets up front here for our newsletter, for the committees that we have spaces on, and we'll be announcing our upcoming panels in November and December. And the final slide here, I've just put some action challenges for you to ponder as we close up tonight. Lots of ways for us each to begin this journey. Go car-free, sign up to work on a committee with us, turn down your thermostat, share a meal with your neighbor, divest from fossil fuels in your portfolios, get inspired and read Belfast's Climate Action Plan, then volunteer to help us draft a Camden Climate Action Plan. So talking about climate change is an important step. We at CamdenCAN are dedicated to creating options and openings for these conversations. We need you. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we'd be glad to take questions.